Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This Liberal Green slush fund scandal is massive. 400 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door improperly, including $330 million involving conflicts of interest of board members, 186 conflicts of interest of board members, including tens of millions of dollars that were funneled directly into companies in which board members had interest in. And as we heard today, we had an assistant deputy minister who was the eyes and ears of the department, who sat in on each of these meetings as money improperly went out the door, including instances of board members padding their own pockets and contravening the SDTC Act. What we also have are two ministers in Justin Trudeau's cabinet who have a lot to answer for, who are in hiding. The Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, and the Minister for ISED, Francois-Philippe Champagne. This committee called on Minister Guilbeault to appear before this committee all the way back on June 6. It's now November 27th, and Minister Guilbeault hasn't found the time to fit an appearance before this committee in his calendar. He is essentially thumbing his nose at this committee and thumbing his nose at answering questions and being accountable as minister. And Minister Guilbeault has a lot to answer for, because it was Minister Guilbeault, lobbyist for Cycle Capital, a close associate of Andre Lise-Matteau, who is and was the CEO of Cycle Capital, who sat on the SDTC board when $10.4 million was funneled illegally, in contravention of Section 12.2 of the SDTC Act, into companies that was within Cycle Capital's portfolio and that Andre Lise-Matteau had interests in. This is a minister who lobbied on behalf of Cycle Capital, the Prime Minister's office, including all the way up to the Chief of Staff, 50 times, and Minister Guilbeault is someone who has an interest in Cycle Capital, who may have profited from the monies that improperly went out the door from SDTC into Ms. Matteau's companies that are within Cycle Capital's portfolio. And Minister Guilbeault sat around the cabinet table when this cabinet voted to approve $700 million taxpayer dollars to go to this corrupt SDTC Green Slush Fund. Then there's Minister Champagne. It's been nearly 2 months since this committee invited Minister Champagne to appear before this committee, and Minister Champagne, like Minister Guilbeault, is in hiding. And I got to say, Minister Champagne has an absolute responsibility to appear before this committee, because this Green Slush Fund falls directly under the purview of the minister's department. He is the minister responsible. And it should be noted that many of the conflicts of interest and the corruption that took place at SDTC, which Minister Champagne is responsible for and must answer for by virtue of being minister, did take place directly under Minister Champagne's watch, which provides that he has even more to answer for. It's not just that he inherited this mess in which things occurred before his time. Conflicts of interest, money improperly going out the door, self-dealing and corruption occurred directly under his watch as minister. And Minister Champagne has a lot to answer for in terms of what appear to be his attempts to cover up the corruption, conflicts, and mismanagement at SDTC. Minister Champagne has repeatedly claimed that when he found out about the corruption and self-dealing, that he took action. Well, how convenient, because all of this was happening while he was minister, and he did nothing until the whistleblower was about to go public. And then all of a sudden, when he realized that he had a scandal that was going to go public, then suddenly Minister Champagne took an interest in the matter. We know that RCGT was retained to undertake an independent fact-finding investigation. According to the whistleblower, an interim report was prepared as far back as May of 2023, RCGT having been retained in March of 2023. And according to the whistleblower, much of what was in the interim RCGT report was damning and was contained in that report that ultimately has been confirmed by the Auditor General. And instead of seeing that report be made public, according to the whistleblower, the minister's office interfered in the release of that report. And I quote the whistleblower from his testimony on September 18th, 2024, before this committee, in which he said, with respect to the interim fact-finding report of RCGT, quote, all of this should have led to immediate action, but once those findings reached the Privy Council office and the minister's office, everything changed. The investigation was delayed for another 4 months, allowing SDTC to continue misusing funds and mistreating employees when at this point the federal government had in fact known this was true. That is something that Minister Champagne needs to come to committee and needs to answer questions about. And not only that, according to the whistleblower, between May and when the RCGT report was finally released, Minister Champagne and his office were involved in tampering with and demanding material alterations to the RCGT report to water it down. According to the whistleblower, by late August or early September, there was discussions at ISED to fire the SDTC board and fire the corrupt executives at SDTC. But suddenly, when the minister got wind of that, that changed. That didn't happen. And we know that that was, in fact, what didn't happen, because when the RCGT report was issued in October, which was a damning report, much of it, if not all of it, supported by the Auditor General's later report, and by the way, the Auditor General found even more damning evidence again in terms of what was going on at SDTC. The minister kept the board in place, including the corrupt and conflicted chair, Annette Verschaeren. So for all of these reasons and more, we need to hear from Minister Champagne. These ministers in this Justin Trudeau government, a government that really is defined by a culture of corruption and a complete lack of transparency, need to be hauled before this committee, and they need to answer questions about what they knew about corruption and mismanagement at SDTC, and I would hope that members would support this motion so that we can hear from these ministers as soon as possible. And it's time that they get out of hiding and come before the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.